dream of a thing you're longing to do. Curious things could happen to you.
Hey everyone, it's Jonathan and welcome back to Wonderland Wednesday, and also still kind of the Christmas movie marathon. If you are a regular listener to Wonderland Wednesday, you should know that while this episode can stand on its own, it does follow up a previous episode of the Christmas movie marathon where I was joined by Jenna and Dan to talk about the legend of Dick Whittington. We recorded that one before Jenna went on a Christmas trip at the beginning of the month, then we recorded this one on Sunday after she returned. This is probably going to be one of the quickest turnarounds I've done on an episode for a while, if I want to get this out by the end of the year. Anyway, if you're at all interested in British literature and fairy tales, which I would assume you are if you like Alice in Wonderland as much as we do, then I would encourage you to check out our Dick Whittington episode as well. Either before or after this one, it probably doesn't matter. These episodes also follow several episodes Dan and I have been doing on the British Christmas tradition of pantomime. I accidentally discovered a pantomime TV special during my prep for Christmas in July, which led to Dan and I covering a bunch of different pantomimes between Christmas in July and now Christmas this past month. I've learned so much about this medium this past year, so if what you hear in this episode sounds interesting, I'd encourage you to check out our other episodes as well. I'll have a whole playlist linked at the end of the episode, or in the description if you're listening to the audio version. Anyway, all that to say, the three of us are combining our interests in this episode. We're coming together to discuss an Alice in Wonderland pantomime, specifically a 2015 one made by the BBC for their CBeebies channel. And well, yes, this is technically a special made for kids. I think we all ended up enjoying it more than we expected. I certainly found it to be a lot more engaging and clever than some of the other things I've watched for Wonderland Wednesday over the years. It wasn't perfect, but I think it was a good introduction to the story for young audiences, as well as a good introduction to the art of pantomime on top of that.
Alice in Wonderland.
Well, starting off, I thought it was way better than the Dick Whittington one, I can tell you that.
I probably agree.
Yeah. I think what I like about it the most is the fact that it is at least closer tied to the actual story. Like the Dick Whittington one felt almost like it had just kind of taken the name of the panto and then done whatever it wanted to do with it. This at least looks and feels like a production of Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's some choices that are a little like
Odd.
creative, for lack of a better word. Yeah. But like it is still pretty much just it's hard to do Alice in Wonderland wrong. I've seen it done wrong before, but it is hard to do. So that this one they did it okay. I have no real big complaints about it. If anything, I would say it might even be decent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if you were looking for a panto-style adaptation of Alice in Wonderland, you could do worse than this. I think that it's a decent stab at trying to make a pantomime adaptation of this story for very, very young children. And similar to Dick Whittington's CBeebies panto, a lot of the core cast are presenters from CBeebies at the time, so they were kind of like TV hosts of the channel at the time. And also Mr. Tumble's back, and I love Mr. Tumble. He's great.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we recognized him.
Is that who played the Queen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I don't think I think I probably watched this first back at the beginning of the month, so it didn't register that it was the same person, and then I watched it again today just to refresh, and I thought the Queen looked familiar, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah, it's him. He's actually, I would say, so I'm glad there was a dame in this one.
Because when I first started watching it, the first time, I kept waiting for a dame to show up, and my thought was, well, it's going to be the Duchess, because even in non-pantomime versions, not always, but a lot of times I've seen the Duchess played by a man. Yeah. So that seemed like the logical thing to do. So when the Duchess came out and it was a woman, I was like, oh, I guess they're not going to do a dame for this one. But then they had the Queen at the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
I will say it was a bit of a low energy dame from like other dames I've seen. Not low energy, that's not the word. Calmer, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah, less manic.
Yeah.
Less campy. There's a bit more of a... I don't want to say he's playing it straight, but he's playing it more...
safe?
Yeah, I would say so. Calmer.
Yeah, I would have preferred, I think, a campier dame, but It was okay.
I just figured it was like that because they're just thinking little kids, especially after we talked about in the last Dick Whittington episode about how they tone things down for kids. I just figured that every aspect of this just kind of had to be toned down.
I would agree. I think that that's probably the strongest idea for it. Bearing in mind that the CBeebies channel really is aimed at kids aged from a few months old through to probably about 5, maybe 6.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that was probably one of the bigger things really about this is, given that it's got the mantle of a panto, to me it didn't really start to get into the swing of it feeling like a pantomime until about 10 to 15 minutes off the end. The majority of the lead in up to that point, I think from around about the time the Queen turns up, and the Mad Hatter's Tea Party, when that kind of stuff starts kicking off, that's when it starts getting a little bit more in line with panto sort of traditions. But before that, it just kind of felt a bit more like a stage production that was maybe being a bit more whimsical.
Yes, that's how I felt for most of it.
Yeah, I can't really speak to how it is as a panto, I guess. Well, I did notice some audience interaction, like, immediately, which I thought maybe that was kind of panto-y about it. Like, at the very beginning, when Alice was with her family, in some undescribed social, like, setting, whatever, and they're like, look at all the rabbits, and the audience is all wearing, like rabbit ear headbands. I was like, oh, well, that's kind of cute. And then later, at some point, it's just like they all have invitations. They've been invited to the Queen's party. Alice is the loser without an invitation. But, I was like, well, that's cute. They've been invited. Like, they're actually kind of part of the story in a sense. And they're encouraged to, like, respond to the actors on the stage. It's interesting. So, like, from my experience, it wasn't really a panto, but, like, there were elements of it. Also, I did notice that like jam tradition, like that jam pie thing, and as soon as that started happening, I was like, oh, it's gonna end up in someone's face. Just based off tradition.
Yes, as soon as they started pulling that stuff out, I was like, okay, this is what Dan would describe as the messy, mucky bit.
Yes. We all love a messy, mucky bit.
So it's hard to think about it like in the same sense of like the other actual pantomimes I've seen. Which, by the way, I might as well mention now I've seen a pantomime in real life too.
Oh, you have?
Yeah, I went to Ireland and I saw a Hansel and Gretel pantomime in Dublin. I say Dublin, it's actually Dundrum. I think we kind of accidentally went to like a really child-focused pantomime, but I didn't mind too much because, it's a pantomime, whatever. Well, it was also kind of like, I feel like it's kind of hard to tell sometimes just how child or adult oriented some pantomimes seem to be. Because they all seem to, we were looking at a bunch, they all seem to say family friendly.
Yeah.
But anyway, and in comparison, like this, this felt very like light pantomime. But there were definitely elements.
I did notice that they sanded off some of the more controversial aspects of the story. So, for example, the caterpillar does not smoke anything at all.
Oh, yeah.
He has bubbles instead of a hookah.
It's pretty common for modern adaptations.
Yeah, I've seen that before.
Yeah.
I think, what's the one with the caterpillar, like, blowing bubbles in a juice or something? Is that 1995? Yeah.
I don't know.
Actually, you know what? I barely even noticed it. I just thought So my workplace, we're kind of obsessed with bubbles. So it's just like, I like the big bubbles the caterpillar's making. I should do that.
I think probably the biggest thing for me that kind of stood out about this pantomime was the ending, which did two things that kind of bothered me a little bit. One was the fact that they totally copped out on the stolen tarts storyline. I was very invested in that. To just have a jam tart tree turn up is quite upsetting to me. The other one was the fact that they didn't return Alice back to reality, so she's just permanently trapped in Wonderland at the end of this.
That's right. I didn't even think of that.
But she has her family.
Yeah, this time she has her whole family, so They can just live there together, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, it's a shame about a real family. But, that being said, I suppose if she went missing for long enough, they probably just didn't care. It was like, didn't we have a daughter at one point? I believe we did. Well, never mind.
It's just a spare daughter. We have another. But yeah, that is one of the curiosities of this version, in terms of like Big and Alice adaptation, is that you see, normally you just see Alice's sister, or in some versions it's a governess or a nanny or something.
Hmm.
But like you don't just see her sister in this; you see her dad and her mom as well, which is very unusual.
I
They're
can't
not
think of any
really
other
needed.
version that has that.
Yeah, well, I guess the 1983 anime has that, but like that was a series, so they kind of had to.
Hmm.
They had
I haven't
Alice.
seen that one yet. It's
Yeah,
too much for me at the moment. It's like
yeah.
2 seasons.
I have not seen the whole thing of that one. To be honest, it's just not as engaging, because it's very like 80s children's anime.
Hmm.
Um, but essentially, in that one, Alice keeps going like to and from Wonderland. It's almost like each chapter of the book of it is its own episode. Almost. There's some places where they go completely off the rails, but like still. But anyway, so like you see her family in that because they kind of had to talk about, show that because they expanded upon it so much. But in this, it's just like you don't really need the family. It's just the story. There's not really any reason for them to be here besides maybe they needed to fill more roles because there weren't that many roles in the story or something.
Probably.
Yeah,
Although weirdly as well, in some regards, whilst they've really fleshed that out, they have really stripped the story back. A lot of the bigger moments that I've seen in other versions of Alice are just not in this version. I think they sort of focused a lot more on the Hatter's Tea Party because I think that's probably the more vibrant, colourful side of it. But a lot of other elements are just like either scaled back to they get a line and then they're gone, or they're not there at all, which is a bit bizarre.
I feel like they did a decent version at picking like the best parts out, but they are very like stripped down because it's ultimately it's like what 44 minutes.
Yeah,
Um,
it's pretty
and
short.
being for only 44 minutes, I actually thought it was pretty decently paced. Yeah, I'm realizing I'm saying a lot of this coming from the perception of watching other Alice adaptations and some of them just being absolute trash. Um, but this one, like, yeah, it does skip a lot. And even the parts and characters we do meet aren't super expanded upon. I would say, like, the Cheshire Cat disappointed me a little bit. It just wasn't as good as the Cheshire Cat normally is.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, so, like, there are points where it just feels really stripped back and, like, not as good as it could have been. But, for a 44-minute, like, panto show for very young children, I didn't think it was that bad. The only thing that I was kind of like, well, that's the choice, was having Alice be the unimaginative one. I was like, well, that's a choice you're making. I don't know if that really works because, like, technically she's the one having this dream and, like, dreaming all this, but okay.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So, you know, okay, I guess. And also, like, the implicate, like, okay, imagination, yes, very important, I agree. But what are the real world implications? If I just, can I invite myself to someone's party who hasn't invited me if I imagine I have an invitation? Is this the takeaway I should have? Like, what are we teaching our children? Or I could eat the whole, like I understand that her family didn't know that the jam tarts were only for the queen, the winner or whatever, basically the queen. But I'm like, they ate all of them. Those greedy. I should say what I'm thinking, but they're very greedy, and it's like, okay, so if I could eat a whole party's tarts and just imagine the replacement for them, then it should be fine. But you're not meant to think that deeply about it. It's just that you're just meant to be there.
I think one of the more bizarre elements of this as well was the fact that Dick Whittington's panto had very abstract and slightly surreal visuals, and this had significantly lesser abstract and surreal visuals, which was a bit
Yeah.
odd. It felt almost like the two styles should have swapped over. I would have much rather watched a more grounded Dick Whittington adaptation and a more surreal Alice than what we ended up with, which was a very bizarre Dick Whittington panto and a quite grounded Alice.
That is true, because the sets were very sparse.
Yeah.
Mm.
Alice's very stripped back set.
Yes, I did think a lot of what they did with it was creative, but
Yeah.
they didn't build a lot. A lot of it was projections, which was fine. But yeah, now that you mention it, Dick Whittington had much more elaborately built sets. So it really does have the upper hand in that regard. I wonder too, though, it could be that maybe this is an earlier one, because this was 2015. I think Dick Whittington was 2022.
Mm.
It was a much more recent, so maybe every year they just kind of up their production budget, and this was an earlier one, so they didn't really know. I mean, they knew what they were doing, but they didn't have the planning in place like they do now.
I think at the time this was made, probably a lot of these, I remember projection mapping being kind of a thing in around 2015. Like at Disneyland, for instance, they were introducing a lot of like projection mapping as like a cool new thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's just where the budget of the show probably went to, was to do the projections, because that was cool. And they tried to be creative with this very skilled back set, which was interesting, but as you said, it wasn't as impressive. But yeah, I think
I do
to
think
them the projections were impressive. Yeah.
the one part I will say I thought was kind of impressive was when she goes down the rabbit hole. I did like that part, because I thought it was a really creative way to get around the growing and shrinking that you'd need to do on stage. Because I kind of just expected that they were going to skip that. But then they had a projection filmed earlier of her behind the set, enormous, and then shrinking down with like prop cake crumbs falling while she's supposedly eating the cake, and then coming through the bit of the set after she has quote unquote shrunk. I thought that was a really creative way to do that.
I am going to say, though, that there is a universe inconsistency in that. How are the crumbs coming down onto the set if she's on the other side of the wall?
I know.
Could she just step over the wall then?
And also, how did the half-eaten cupcake shrink with her? Because it's not part of her biology.
Yeah, that's also a point. We're thinking too much about this.
Of course.
I was like, I was like suitably impressed, but also like kind of disappointed at the same time, for lack of a better word, that it didn't really make any sense. But it's whatever. Show for children, I guess.
Yeah. What did you think of the Duchess and her house and cook and baby?
There was a point where something the baby said actually made me laugh, just because it was so stupid.
There was one part where I did laugh. The baby was kind of gave me whiplash between like, this is weird, mildly disturbing, and then suddenly it was hilarious, and then it was back to being disturbing again. But the one part where he's like doing a bunch of babbling and screaming, and then he goes, "You know what I mean?" That made me laugh.
That is what I love. Yeah. But yeah, there was another point in this also that made my boyfriend laugh, and then he was just like, "Oh, screw it." It's stupid. It made me laugh. So like we both had that moment, but I'm also starting to remember when that was for him. But there is some like decent humor in this adaptation.
Yeah, I would agree. The White Rabbit rewind joke was probably my favourite.
Oh, I have an interesting comment about that, but yeah, go ahead.
Oh, that was it. I was just saying I enjoyed that particular bit. I think that was probably one of the highlights. I did also love the Ring Around the Table song, which was probably the best song in the panto. I found the songs a little bit hit and miss, personally, but that one I really liked.
I actually thought they were pretty decent, but my favorite one was probably the very first one, even though I think I thought they were decent, but now I don't remember how any of them go. So,
They were decent in the fact that sometimes in kids' media, songs can be annoying, and these were fine.
They didn't grate on the nerves.
Yes.
They weren't very catchy either, though. They were okay, which is actually sometimes a strong compliment. But anyway, there was I did want to talk about that watch scene. So, as a huge nerd of Lewis Carroll stuff, I thought it was extremely interesting, and I wasn't sure if this was on purpose at all. Probably not. But the way the watch is used, where you could go forwards and backwards on the rabbit, is very similar to the outlandish watch in Lewis Carroll's later work, Sylvie and Bruno, where there is a watch that works exactly to this fashion, where you could like rewind and fast forward time. But I feel like only I am that big of a kind of a nerd to know that. So I'm like, I don't think this is a reference, but this is a thing.
I mean, it could be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I doubt it is a reference because most people don't read Sylvie and Bruno. But, just an interesting tidbit.
I mean, Alice in Wonderland does play with time a little bit, especially with
Yeah.
the tea party scene. So maybe that's what they were going for. But it would be cool if somebody who wrote this was that much of a Lewis Carroll geek and thought that they would throw in a reference from one of his lesser known works.
Absolutely.
How do we feel about the rabbit being like some part robot thing?
I did not know what they were going for with that.
Yeah. I thought they were gonna go for like he is part clockwork, but then his watch is separate from him, so that's not what they were going for. I don't know. I was very confused.
Maybe it was wireless. As somebody who's is a big fan of science fiction, I am pro robotics. So any robo rabbits are okay in my book.
Interestingly, there is an episode in the 1990s Disney Channel show Adventures in Wonderland where a white rabbit robot is made that like tries to replace the original white rabbit. And again, I don't think that's a reference at all because that would be really obscure. But just interest, it's kind of if I had a dime every time there was a white rabbit bunny, I would have like a white rabbit robot, I'd have like 2 dimes. Where that's happened twice, Um,
Are there any straight up science fiction Alice in Wonderland adaptations? I can think
no.
of there's that Alice mini series from the Sci-Fi Channel.
Oh yeah, I guess that's the closest you're gonna get.
Okay.
I feel like Alice. I mean, like American McGee Alice has kind of flirted with steampunk before, with some level designs in regards to I think to the Mad Hatter, but like that, I think that's the closest anybody's really gotten to actually doing adaptation like that.
That would be interesting. It's been done so
Yeah.
many different ways. I'm surprised that nobody's done like a really, I mean, the Sci-Fi Channel version is kind of out there, but like a straight adaptation of the book, because that one wasn't like a straight adaptation of the book.
Yeah.
It would be interesting for someone to like take the book and do the book, but give it a really sci-fi feel.
It would be interesting. No one's done it though. As far as I know, there might be a play out there.
It's kind of surprising, really. You'd think it almost loaned itself to that aesthetic, especially given how many years have passed since the book was originally published. You would have thought somebody might have jumped on it, even if it was just like a sort of novel adaptation in that style. But I know that there have been science fiction shows that have borrowed elements of Alice in Wonderland and incorporated it into their works, like The Matrix is probably the most obvious example of that. But
there's been a lot of
I can't
sci-fi
say.
that referenced Alice too, or
Yeah.
like there was, I believe, a Star Trek moment where I don't know the context behind the episode, but like they saw Alice and like what's that holographic room?
Oh, the holodeck.
The holodeck, yeah, they saw Alice in the holodeck for some reason, like the actual like book character. And I know Doctor Who has done like a bunch of quotes of Alice, so like it's interesting. There's always been kind of a flirtation of Alice in sci-fi, but no like straightforward adaptation.
There was a lot of references in the show Lost also. There was no adaptation of anything specifically, but there was a lot of references to lines and figures from Alice in Wonderland sprinkled throughout the show.
I think also I haven't watched this, but Serial Experiments Lane I think is pretty sci-fi, right? It's also pretty Alice in Wonderland inspired, from what I understand, but I've never seen it.
I don't think I've heard of that.
Yeah, it just didn't sound Alice-y enough for me to actually specifically go watch. Maybe someday I will. But yeah, I would like to see Alice done in more like different aesthetics, just because it'd be fun.
Yeah,
Particularly, I would want a steampunk aesthetic right now.
yeah, definitely. That feels like the most obvious. That feels even more obvious than straight up science fiction.
Yeah,
Steampunk just feels like a natural continuation for all the different ways it's been interpreted. It just feels like that should be something that should exist.
yeah.
Mm.
But I do think Alice lends itself to any aesthetic, really.
Yeah.
So I would like to see more in the future, but adaptations have played it pretty straight for the most part.
I personally relish the opportunity for a Western Alice in Wonderland.
Like a Wild West?
Yeah, yeah.
Huh. That's an interesting idea.
I can see it. I can
I've
see it.
never thought of that before, but I would watch it.
Oh,
I mean, I would watch any version that came out, even if it seemed like it was going to be bad, but that seems particularly interesting. That is not a combination I've ever thought of before.
no. But it's one of the kind of grows a little. The more you think about the story and how it could be incorporated into that genre, the more wild things get, kind of.
Yeah.
It's fun.
It's like the White Knight and the Red Knight could be in a gunfight or something.
Yes, yeah.
Mm. Mad Hatter's the town drunk.
That's not tea in his teacup.
But yeah, you could be quite creative with the story. Ironically, this Panto, I actually played it pretty straight. It's not as much as it talks about imagination. I don't really think it made that many creative choices that differed that much from the material.
Uh-huh.
The only thing they really did was kind of make it about imagination.
Yeah, it was pretty straightforward for the most part. I think the main thing that they changed that kind of rippled throughout the whole thing was just to give Alice a through line. Because like a lot of versions have to do that, like they have to give Alice some motivating force to get her from the beginning to the end, instead of having it just be a random series of weird adventures in a dream. So this one,
Yeah.
they gave her the task of finding her imagination and getting an invitation to the Queen's party. So that
and
kind of,
inviting her family. And I just felt like it just didn't really land that well personally, because I don't
yeah,
think that, as much as Alice in Wonderland is a very imaginative story, I don't think it works to have her in an imaginative world and somehow she's not imaginative, even though she's the one supposedly dreaming this, you would think.
that is true. I don't know why I didn't think of that, but you're right.
Yeah. So I feel like this moral, quote unquote, didn't really work that well. But, again, it's just a panto.
Something did actually just occur to me whilst you guys were sort of talking about it. Obviously, this panto has quite a bit cut from it, and the set was a little bit more sparse and all of that kind of vibes. It just occurred to me that this obviously came out and was shot in 2015 towards the end of the year. And one of the big things that was happening in the UK around that time was the sort of gearing up for the prospective Brexit vote. And one of the big things that kind of ties into that is that there was a lot of discussion around this time around how the country would function economically from that standpoint. So maybe one of the reasons why this panto is a little bit more sparse and thinly funded than other editions could simply be that the BBC, who were funding it at the time, were having a bit of a funding crisis anyway, and kind of sat there and thought, well, if Brexit happens and the economy does shift, we could be tremendously out of pocket as a result of that. Maybe we should be a little bit careful with our money in the lead up to it, just in case anything happens that could cause us to lose a lot of money, or sort of funding lanes or things like that. So that might possibly explain why this was a little bit thinner on the ground than other pantomimes that they did in the sort of surrounding years.
I can almost kind of picture like a board executive be like, so we're not giving you that much money. It's like, but what about the children? It's like the children can imagine.
Yeah.
Like,
He's just there with like a highlighter, just basically going, no, no.
Suddenly, the script makes a lot more sense.
Can the caterpillar just be a man in a long suit? Now imagine him without the suit. Yes, we can afford that.
Go to the British version of Bass Pro Shops and buy a sleeping bag to put him in.
You think we have UK Bass Pro Shop sleeping bag money? All we've got is all of this asbestos we removed from the roof. Wrap him in that. That'll be fine. He'll be fireproof. It'll work.
Fireproof. But yeah, I thought it was okay. The only moment I was disappointed with really was the Cheshire Cat, just because I don't know, it's just something about projection on a screen that's just not very exciting, in my opinion.
I feel like it could have been better if they'd used the projection in a more imaginative way, because basically all they did was just have his head on one tree and then it moved to another tree, and it was just kind of boring. I feel like if they'd had a bigger budget for somebody to do some kind of an animation with
some kind of effect with the projection.
Yeah, it could have looked better than it did. It was just kind of boring the way they did it. Like, it was fine. Again, this is for little kids. This probably was amazing to them who have never seen something like this before. But to me, it was just kind of, meh, it's an interesting way to do the Cheshire Cat on a budget, but it wasn't really impressive.
I think that was like one of the few actual quotes from the book was during the Cheshire Cat scene. It was close to the book story, but there weren't a lot of like direct quotes from the book.
That is true. Yeah.
Yeah. This one, like, I've often seen a cat without a grin, but a grin without a cat is the most scariest thing I ever saw. Something like that. I don't even think she said it exactly like that in the panto, but like pretty darn close.
It was closer than a lot of the other dialogue. Because a lot of the other dialogue was kind of made up to go along with the imagination/invitation storyline that they were running with.
Yeah.
But yeah, for the most part, this was fine. I think my favorite part was the down the rabbit hole scene, but it wasn't one that, I mean, I've watched it twice now, but it wasn't one that I would go back to probably just for fun. It was just like, yeah, that's a thing. I guess it's probably a good one to introduce very little kids to Alice with, but it's probably not a favorite.
I probably showed it to a kid, like a young kid. Again, I have a hard time imagining. Like, I saw this shortly after it came out, maybe like 2016, and I hadn't watched it since then. I totally forgot what was even in it. Besides that, I just thought it was decent, and that's still kind of what I'm coming around. Same opinion of it's decent. I'm probably not gonna watch it again anytime soon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree. I think as far as pantomimes go, it's maybe a little panto light, I think is probably the best way to describe it. It does the job. If you like, as you rightly said, if you've got very, very young kids, it would probably be a good introduction to Alice as a story concept, and probably a very gentle easing into panto as a culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you're kind of a seasoned veteran of the boards and you've had your fair licks of both Alice and panto, I don't think you'll get that much out of it. I think for me, the peak was probably the Mad Hatter's Tea Party bit, but that was very short-lived and didn't quite lead to anything grander. That was kind of the peak for me. It's fine. It's an okay theatrical sort of panto light version of Alice. I've definitely seen better, but I've also seen worse.
Are there any other filmed pantomime versions of Alice in Wonderland?
Not that I know of, but I've never been. This might disappoint some people, but I've always kind of made a distinction between stage plays and like TV productions, just because there are so many plays out there, and I would go crazy if I collected them all. And I know this because I did initially try to care about that kind of stuff, and I just couldn't. It was like exhaustion. I know I haven't talked to her in quite a long time, but I know Chloe from with Dreaming Eyes of Wonder or / All in the Golden Afternoon. I don't know, not sure which handle she goes by right now. I know she's really into that, so like she did some collecting. I don't remember her mentioning like an Alice in Wonderland panto, in particular. I'm sure there must be some out there somewhere.
I suppose it's almost kind of how far down the rabbit hole do you want to go as well, because like with the pun, because you've got obviously filmed theatrical productions, which are things that are professionally shot that way, but then you also have televised productions of panto, like the CBeebies ones. You have local productions where the bigger budget theatres might record it to release as a kind of souvenir edition that you can pick up as part of the merchandise table at your pantomime. And then you've even got like the niche stuff where like local regional amateur dramatic groups will film their panto productions and put them on YouTube. So I suppose it's really kind of finding the line in the sand where you can say, okay, this is where I stop, because otherwise you'll be there at 4 o'clock in the morning going, yes, the Bradbury Amateur Dramatic Society's production of Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much the reality of like going into collecting stage adaptation recordings. There's too much. So my distinction was it had to be like broadcasted in some way for me to have an interest in it and collecting it. But like so much of it could just be posted on YouTube. And yeah, I do see there's at least one Alice in Wonderland panto, and I see that there's some YouTube shorts apparently with clips from different pantos. But yeah, there's not that much, I guess.
Yeah, it's kind of, I don't want to say it's B-tier panto fodder, but it's the kind of thing that people don't immediately go to for panto. The big hitters tend to be things like Aladdin, Sleeping Beauty, Cinderella, Snow White. There's a Robin Hood panto adaptation that does the rounds quite regularly, and then kind of Alice is probably the next tier down, where you get things like Jack and the Beanstalk, Alice in Wonderland. Dick Whittington kind of flip-flops between that sort of A grade and B grade panto choice. Most theatrical productions tend to like stuff with princesses or maidens, just purely because it kind of lets you in the kindest way, lets you drag up a load of old scripts and very quickly alter them to modern audiences. A lot of amateur dramatic societies prefer stuff like Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, Snow White, because you can very easily go back over 40, 50 years worth of script adaptations of those for pantomimes and just cherry pick gags out and modernize them a bit, and then you're good to go. But yeah, it's not one that most people would expect to be on the panto roster every year.
Yeah, because I didn't come across, like, getting into looking up different pantomimes for Christmas in July and now this Christmas. Most of what I was finding was Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, Snow White, those kind of things. So there was very few, well, no Alice, except for this one that came up when I was searching for pantomimes. So yeah, it wasn't one that I've seen, but I would be interested in watching like an actual a full family audience pantomime, not just aimed at little kids, just to see what kind of a twist they might put on it for that. I would assume that they would have more than one panto dame, because like the Duchess needs to be a panto dame. Like this feels like an oversight for this one.
It completely escaped me. This year I forgot to see whether any of the main channels were doing a pantomime. I should have really checked. But usually at least one channel decides to kind of take the plunge and do some kind of panto production, whether it's, mainline BBC or ITV or CBeebies or CBBC. Channel 5 sometimes do it as well. But one of them normally does go, okay, we're going to do a panto adaptation for television this year. With that in mind, though, this year's television listings in the UK were absolutely diabolical. Like 90% of the Christmas Day, Boxing Day, Christmas Eve listings were repeats from last year or quiz shows, and that was it. So the old purse strings getting a little tight, it would seem.
Yeah, most likely, I would assume.
No new Doctor Who, no new Wallace and Gromit.
That face. It was a very cold Christmas for British TV viewers. There was a lot of, do you want to watch this again? And it was like, we only watched it 10 minutes ago. What do you mean 10 minutes ago was 12 months ago? Yeah, eat more cheese.
Time has no meaning here.
It's a flat circle.
Well, I think we've exhausted all aspects of this very short children's adaptation of Alice in Wonderland.
I will say, I think it was pretty good pacing.
Yeah.
For what it was, yes. I was
Yeah.
expecting to be bored. Like I went into this, I really expected like I was going to be like, why am I here? Why am I watching this? Because I've had that happen before with different things that we're doing podcasts on, but I did not feel like that with this.
One time I felt awful watching a 10-minute Alice anime adaptation that was dragged on. It was only 10 minutes. And ever since then, I've always kind of been very aware of like pacing and how things feel when you're watching it. This
Mhm.
one, very decent, only 4 to 4 minutes. You never feel like you're wasting your time exactly. Unless you feel like you're wasting your time watching children's media at all, then okay. But like, if you're used to watching children's media, it's very decently paced. You never really have a moment where you're too bored and you're like, "What am I doing?" It ends before you even really know it happened. To be honest, like it just kind of
That
good
is
pacing.
true. Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, I think that'll be all for this episode. Thanks for joining me for these. I'm sure we'll be back for more Alice and or pantomimes in the future. Until next time, do you guys want to let people know where they can find you if they'd like more from you? Jenna?
Still, She Haunts Me Phantomize is my Alice channel, and Love Gift of a Fairy Tale is my Anything Else channel.
And Dan?
You can find me on Letterboxd, Blue Sky, and YouTube as TYTD Reviews. We cover cult classics, deconstructing strange cinema to see how it ticks, and then putting it back together in the best possible way. Nothing currently on the horizon for coming out just yet. We're on a little bit of a break, but hopefully we'll be back at some point in the new year with some new crazy reviews. So have a look at me, and thank you again for having me on. Much appreciated.
Well, thanks for joining me, and we'll see you next year.
See you next year.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to Wonderland Wednesday. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe and follow my co-hosts as well. My link tree and all of our links will be in the description below. If you want more of my content, all my podcasts are available on YouTube as well as most podcast platforms. If you enjoyed this show, check out one of the other podcasts or check out my Patreon for bonus and extended episodes you won't find anywhere else. We'll be back soon with another brand new episode, so thanks for listening and we'll see you next time.
Come along and pass through the looking glass into Wonderland.